The year was 2157, and Earth was dying. Sarah Chen stood at the window of the Global Crisis Center in New Geneva, watching the red dust storm roll across what used to be the Swiss Alps. The mountains looked like broken teeth now, stripped bare by the endless droughts and flash floods that had torn the planet apart over the last 50 years. Behind her, the Emergency Council argued in 12 different languages. Food riots were spreading across 3 continents. The ocean levels had risen 6 meters, swallowing entire cities. The temperature had climbed so high that most of Africa and Australia were no longer safe for human life. Nearly 3 billion people had died in the last decade alone. Sarah pressed her hand against the thick glass. She was only 34, but she felt ancient. As Earth's lead environmental scientist, she had spent the last 10 years watching their planet slip away despite every effort to save it. The carbon scrubbers had failed. The weather machines had broken down. Even the underground cities were running out of air. Dr. Chen, called Director Martinez from across the room. What is your final report? Sarah turned around. The 50 world leaders looked at her with tired eyes. They all knew what she was going to say, but they needed to hear it spoken out loud. We have 18 months, she said quietly. Maybe less. The atmospheric systems are collapsing faster than our computers predicted. The magnetic field is weakening because of all the mining we did for rare metals. Food production is down to 30% of what we need. Water is... She stopped. There was no point in listing all the ways their world was ending. Everyone in the room had lost family members to the crisis. Everyone had seen their homeland change beyond recognition. 18 months until what? Asked President Williams of the North American Federation. Until we cannot support human life on the surface, Sarah said. The underground cities can hold maybe 500 million people for another 5 years if we're lucky. After that, she did not need to finish. After that, humanity would be extinct. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the air filters working overtime to keep the building livable. Outside, the dust storm howled like a living thing. That was when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. Security Chief Rodriguez was already talking into his radio. All stations report. Are we under attack? No, sir, came the voice through the static. It's not an attack. You need to see this. Every screen in the room suddenly came alive with the same image. It showed the sky above New Geneva, but something was blocking out the sun. Something massive and impossibly beautiful. The ship was 3 kilometers long and shaped like a teardrop made of silver and glass. It hung in the air without making a sound, defying everything humans knew about physics. Smaller lights danced around it like fireflies, and the whole thing seemed to pulse with soft blue energy. My God, whispered Director Martinez. They're real. For the first time in decades, Sarah felt something that was not despair. She felt wonder. The largest screen in the room suddenly filled with static, then cleared to show a face unlike anything humans had ever seen. The being's skin was translucent and seemed to be made of living crystal. Its eyes were large and kind, the color of deep ocean water. When it spoke, the words appeared in perfect text across the bottom of the screen in every human language. People of Earth, the being said, and its voice was like music. We are the Catherians. We have been watching your world for many years. We see that you are in great pain. We have come to help. Security Chief Rodriguez stepped forward. How do we know you're not here to invade us? To take what's left of our planet? The Catherian tilted its head slightly, and Sarah could swear she saw sadness in those ocean blue eyes. We understand your fear, it said. Our own people once faced a crisis like yours. We know the terror of watching everything you love slip away. We know what it means to lose hope. The image changed to show the Catherian homeworld. It was beautiful beyond description, with floating cities and forests that seemed to grow in impossible spirals toward the sky. Rivers of light flowed between crystal mountains, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with life. We learned to heal our world, the Catherian continued. We learned to live in harmony with the forces of nature instead of fighting them. We want to share this knowledge with you. We want to help you heal Earth. What do you want in return? Demanded President Williams. Nothing, the Catherian said simply. We wish only to learn from you as you learn from us. Your people have something that ours lost long ago. You have the ability to feel hope even in the darkest times. You have the strength to love even when everything seems lost. These are gifts more precious than any technology. Sarah found herself stepping closer to the screen. You really want to help us? Just help us? The Catherian's expression grew warmer. Yes, Dr. Chen, we know who you are. We know how hard you have fought to save your world. We want to fight alongside you. For the next 6 hours, the Catherians explained their offer. They had technology that could clean the atmosphere in months instead of centuries. They had machines that could bring life back to dead soil and turn salt water into fresh water without any waste. They had energy systems that worked with natural forces instead of against them. They wanted to share all of it freely. Some of the world leaders were suspicious. They demanded guarantees and contracts and detailed explanations of Catherian motivations. But Sarah could see the truth in those alien eyes. These beings had crossed the galaxy not to conquer or exploit, but to save a dying world simply because it was the right thing to do. By dawn of the next day, humanity had made its choice. They would accept the Catherian aid. 3 days later, the first Catherian ships landed in major cities around the world. The aliens that emerged were even more beautiful in person than on the screens. They moved with grace and purpose, carrying devices that hummed with gentle energy. They spoke softly to the crowds that gathered, always careful to show respect for human customs and fears. Sarah was chosen to be one of the first humans to work directly with the Catherians. Her partner was a scientist named Zethai, whose crystalline skin caught the light like a living prism. When they shook hands for the first time, Sarah felt a warm tingling, as if the alien's very touch carried healing energy. Your planet is sick, Zethai told her as they stood together on the roof of the crisis center, looking out at the broken landscape. But sickness can be cured, death can be reversed, hope can be restored. Sarah looked up at the alien ships floating serenely in the red sky. For the first time in 10 years, she believed that tomorrow might be better than today. The healing of Earth was about to begin. 20 years had passed since the Catherians first arrived, and Earth was almost unrecognizable. Sarah stood in the same spot where the crisis center used to be, but now she was surrounded by a vast garden that stretched to the horizon. The Swiss Alps had been rebuilt, not with metal and concrete, but with living crystal formations that the Catherians had taught humans to grow. Water flowed down the mountainsides in streams so pure that she could see fish swimming in them from hundreds of meters away. The air was clean and sweet. The sky was blue again. It still amazes me, said Zethai, appearing beside her with that fluid grace that all Catherians possessed. Your species adapted to our technology faster than we thought possible. Sarah smiled and touched one of the crystal trees that grew nearby. It hummed softly under her fingers, part of the vast network of atmospheric processors that had healed Earth's damaged climate. You gave us the tools. We just learned how to use them. But it had been much more than that, and they both knew it. The transformation had not been easy. For the first 5 years, many humans had struggled to trust the alien technology. Some groups had even fought against the changes, claiming that humanity should solve its own problems or die trying. There had been protests, sabotage, and even a few small wars as old governments tried to maintain control over the new abundance. But the Catherians had been patient. They had never forced their help on anyone. Instead, they had worked with small communities, showing them how to use the technology safely and effectively. They had shared not just machines, but knowledge. Not just solutions, but understanding. Sarah remembered the day when the first dead forest had come back to life. She had been working with Zethai in what used to be the Amazon rainforest, using Catherian bioenhancers to restore soil that had been poisoned by decades of industrial farming. They had planted a single seed in the black earth and watched as it grew into a tree in minutes, its roots spreading out to wake up other sleeping seeds. Within a week, an entire forest had bloomed where there had been only dust and ash. Now, Earth had more forests than it had possessed in 200 years. The oceans were clean and full of life. Deserts had become grasslands. The polar ice caps were growing again, but in a controlled way that did not threaten coastal cities. More importantly, humanity itself had changed. Sarah walked through the garden with Zethai, heading toward the learning center where the next generation of humans was being educated. These children had grown up with Catherian teachers, learning not just science and mathematics, but also philosophy and emotional balance. They could solve problems that had puzzled their parents for decades, and they could see connections between ideas that had never been obvious before. Look at them, Zethai said softly as they reached the center. Through the transparent walls, Sarah could see a group of 12-year-old humans working with a young Catherian named Veltar. The children were building something that looked like a miniature star, using tools that combined human intuition with Catherian precision. Their faces showed a concentration and joy that was beautiful to watch. One of the children, a girl named Maria Santos, suddenly laughed and pointed at their creation. "I know what we did wrong. We were thinking too much like humans. We need to feel the energy pattern the way Veltar does." She placed her hands on the device and closed her eyes. Immediately, the artificial star began to pulse with steady light. The other children cheered, and even Veltar's crystalline features showed what Sarah had learned to recognize as Catherian delight. "They are becoming something new," Zethai observed. "Not human, not Catherian, but something that is both and neither." Sarah nodded. She had seen it in her own daughter, Lisa, who was now 18 and working on advanced physics projects that impressed even the most senior Catherian scientists. Lisa could understand complex mathematical equations through pure intuition, but she could also feel the emotional weight of how those equations affected real people's lives. It was the same with children all over Earth. They were growing up bilingual in logic and emotion, able to think with both human creativity and Catherian precision. Some of the older humans worried about what this meant for the future of humanity, but Sarah saw only hope. The Catherians had given humanity much more than technology. They had shared their medicine, which had extended human lifespans to over 150 years while keeping people healthy and strong. They had taught humans new forms of art that could touch the mind as well as the heart. They had shown humans how to resolve conflicts through understanding rather than force. But perhaps most importantly, they had given humans a new perspective on their place in the universe. "Zethai," Sarah said as they continued their walk, "can I ask you something that I have wondered about for years?" "Of course. Why did your people really come to help us? I know what you said about learning from our hope and love, but there has to be more to it than that." Zethai was quiet for a long time. They walked past a group of teenagers who were practicing what they called harmony dancing, a form of movement that somehow helped plants grow faster and stronger. The young people moved together as if they shared one mind, but each of them added their own unique style to the dance. Finally, Zethai spoke. "My people are very old, Sarah. We have lived in peace and prosperity for thousands of years. We have solved almost every problem that our civilization ever faced. We have learned to live without war, without poverty, without disease." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah said. "It is," Zethai agreed, "but it is also empty. When there are no challenges left to face, when every question has been answered and every need has been met, what reason is there to continue growing? What reason is there to dream of something better?" Sarah was beginning to understand. "We had become stagnant," Zethai continued. "Our birth rates were falling because our young people could not see any point in creating new life. Our artists had stopped creating because everything worth making had already been made. Our scientists had stopped exploring because they believed they had learned everything worth knowing. They stopped walking and looked out over the garden, where human and Catherian children were playing together, creating games that neither species had ever imagined alone. But then we found humanity," Zethai said. "We found a species that could face the end of their entire world and still find reasons to love, to hope, to fight for each other. We found people who could look at impossible problems and somehow find solutions that our logic told us could not exist." Sarah smiled. "So you came here to remember how to dream again?" "Yes," Zethai said, "and you have taught us so much more than we ever hoped to learn." As if to prove the point, one of the human Catherian children ran up to them, carrying the miniature star that her group had successfully created. It pulsed with warm light and sang a little song that seemed to make the flowers around them bloom brighter. "Dr. Chen." "Zethai, look what we made," the girl said excitedly. "It is not just a star. It is a star that makes music and helps plants grow and can clean dirty water all at the same time." Sarah knelt down to look at the device more closely. It was impossible according to every scientific principle she had learned in her youth, but it was clearly working. The child had combined Catherian energy manipulation with human artistic instinct to create something that was more than the sum of its parts. "This is incredible, Maria," Sarah said. "How did you think of this?" The girl shrugged as if it was obvious. "I wanted to make something that would help people and make them happy at the same time. Veltar taught me how to shape energy, but I felt that the energy wanted to sing. So I let it. After Maria ran back to her friends, SciFi turned to Sarah with an expression of wonder. Do you see what she did? She did not follow our logical methods or your human methods. She created a new method entirely. She felt what the energy wanted and gave it permission to become more than either of our species could have imagined. Sarah watched the children continue their experiments, each discovery building on the last, each breakthrough leading to new questions and new possibilities. I think, she said slowly, that you Catherians may have given us the greatest gift possible. You did not just save our planet. You helped us become something better than we were before. And you, SciFi replied, have given us something even more precious in return. You have given us back our sense of wonder. As the sun set over the reborn Earth, casting golden light over gardens that should not have been possible, Sarah realized that the transformation was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Sarah's daughter Lisa stood before the Catherian High Council, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to deliver the most important presentation of her life. At 25, she had become one of Earth's leading xenobiology experts, but today she was not speaking as a scientist. Today she was speaking as a friend who had discovered a terrible truth. The council chamber was a marvel of Catherian architecture, built from living crystal that grew in perfect mathematical spirals toward a domed ceiling that showed the stars in real time. 12 elderly Catherians sat in a circle, their crystalline bodies dim with age, their ocean blue eyes patient but wary. Honored counselors, Lisa began, her voice steadier than she felt. I have spent the last 3 years studying Catherian biology and culture, and I have discovered something that I believe you have been hiding from us. The lead counselor, an ancient being named Thelvis, whose crystal skin had turned almost white with age, gestured for her to continue. You did not come to Earth just to help us, Lisa said. You came because your own species is dying. A ripple of what might have been surprise passed through the council. Thelvis leaned forward slightly. Explain, the counselor said simply. Lisa activated a holographic display that showed data she had gathered from thousands of hours of research. Charts and graphs filled the air between her and the council, painting a picture that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Your birth rates have been declining for over 1,000 years, she said. Your current population is less than half of what it was during your golden age. Your artists have stopped creating new works. Your scientists have stopped making discoveries. Your philosophers have stopped asking new questions. She changed the display to show images of Catherian cities on their homeworld. They were magnificent beyond human imagination, but Lisa had learned to see what was hidden beneath the perfection. Your cities are monuments to past achievements, but they are not growing. Your people live for thousands of years, but fewer and fewer children are being born to replace those who choose to fade away. You are not just stagnant. You are slowly becoming extinct. The council was silent for a long moment. Finally, Thelvis spoke. You are correct, young human. We have been hiding this truth, though not out of deception. We simply did not wish to burden you with our problems when you had so many of your own. Lisa felt her heart break a little. But that is exactly why you came to Earth, is it not? You were hoping that contact with humanity would somehow cure the sickness in your own culture. Another counselor, Mirkan, whose crystal skin still held flecks of blue, nodded slowly. We had observed your species for many years before we made contact. We saw how you could create beauty even in the midst of destruction. We saw how you could find hope even when facing extinction. We saw how you could love each other even when everything else was falling apart. These are abilities that our people lost long ago, added a third counselor. We achieved perfect logic, perfect efficiency, perfect harmony. But in doing so, we somehow lost the ability to feel surprise, to embrace chaos, to find joy in the unexpected. Lisa changed her display again, this time showing recordings of human children working with young Catherians. The footage showed something remarkable. The young Catherians were more animated, more creative, more alive than any adult of their species had been for centuries. But it is working, Lisa said excitedly. Look at Veltar and the other young Catherians who have been working with human children. They are rediscovering imagination. They are learning to play. They are starting to ask questions that do not have logical answers. She showed more footage. A young Catherian named Zilith who had learned to paint from human children, creating artworks that combined mathematical precision with emotional expression in ways that made older Catherians weep. Another young Catherian, Nevtar, who had started composing music that told stories instead of just demonstrating harmonic principles. Your young people are changing, Lisa continued. Contact with humanity is teaching them to feel wonder again. But there is something else happening that I think you have not realized. Yet she brought up her most important data, genetic and cultural analysis that had taken her months to compile. Humans are changing too, but not in the way we expected. The children who are growing up with Catherian education are not just becoming smarter or more logical. They are developing new ways of thinking that combine human intuition with Catherian analysis. They are becoming something that neither species could produce alone. The council members looked at each other with expressions that Lisa had learned to recognize as deep concern. What exactly are you suggesting? Asked Thelvas. Lisa took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine the future of both species. I am suggesting that we stop pretending this is just about sharing technology and knowledge. Both of our species need each other to survive. Humans need Catherian wisdom to avoid making the same mistakes that nearly destroyed our planet. Catherians need human creativity to avoid fading away into perfect, meaningless existence. She paused, then spoke the words that she knew would change everything. I am suggesting that we stop thinking of this as two separate species helping each other, and start thinking of it as one new form of life being born from the best parts of both. The silence that followed was so complete that Lisa could hear her own heartbeat. The counselors sat motionless, processing implications that reached far beyond anything they had planned when they first came to Earth. Finally, Mir Khan spoke. What you are describing is not just cultural exchange. It is evolution, the creation of something unprecedented. Yes, Lisa said, and I think it is happening whether we plan for it or not. The question is whether we guide the process carefully or let it happen by accident. Thelva stood slowly, moving to one of the crystal windows that showed the view outside. In the distance, a group of human and Catherian teenagers were working together on some kind of construction project, their laughter echoing across the crystalline landscape. You humans, the ancient counselor said softly, continue to surprise us. We came to your world expecting to give you gifts that would save your species. We did not expect you to offer us a gift that could save ours. And we did not expect to discover that saving your species might be the key to ensuring our own future, Lisa replied. Human civilization nearly destroyed itself because we never learned to balance emotion with logic, creativity with discipline, individual freedom with collective responsibility. Working with Catherians is teaching us that balance. Another counselor, Yilvash, joined Thelvas at the window. But what you are proposing frightens some of us. If our young people become too much like humans, will they still be Catherian? If human children learn too much from us, will they still be human? Lisa smiled, thinking of her young friend Maria Santos, who could now shape energy like a Catherian, while composing songs that made crystals sing in harmonies no pure Catherian had ever imagined. I think, she said, that they will be something better than either. They will be what both of our species could become if we have the courage to grow together. She brought up one final image. A projection showing what Earth and the Catherian homeworld might look like in 50 years if the cultural blending continued. The projection showed cities that were part grown crystal and part organic architecture, where beings that looked both human and Catherian worked together on projects that neither species could have conceived alone. This is not about losing our identities, Lisa explained. It is about expanding them, about becoming more than we ever thought possible. Thelvas turned back to face her, and for the first time since Lisa had known the ancient being, she saw something that looked like excitement in those ocean blue eyes. You are asking us to take the greatest risk either species has ever taken, the counselor said. You are asking us to trust that by changing everything, we will not lose everything. Yes, Lisa said simply, because the alternative is that both of our species slowly fade away, each locked in the limitations that nearly destroyed us before we found each other. The council deliberated for hours while Lisa waited outside, watching human and Catherian children play games that would have been impossible for either species to invent alone. When the counselors finally called her back, she could see that their decision would reshape the future of two worlds. The Catherian High Council accepts your proposal, Thelvas announced. We will work with human leaders to create a formal alliance aimed at guiding the evolution of both our species. We will share not just technology and knowledge, but our deepest cultural wisdom and our greatest fears. Lisa felt tears of relief stream down her face. And if we succeed? If we really can help each other become something new, Murkan answered. And for the first time in centuries, a Catherian counselor smiled with genuine joy. Then perhaps we will not just save 2 dying civilizations. Perhaps we will give birth to something that could spread hope across the entire galaxy. 5 years after the Great Alliance was formed, Maria Santos stood in front of the Combined Research Council with an invention that should have been impossible. She was 30 years old now, one of the first generation of humans to grow up entirely in the post-contact world, and she represented something that neither species had ever imagined. The device on the table before her was no larger than her fist, but it contained technology that combined human intuition with Catherian precision in ways that defied both species' traditional understanding of science. It was beautiful to look at aerocrystalline like Catherian work, but flowing and organic like human art. Members of the council, Maria began, speaking to an audience that included both humans and Catherians, I present to you the Harmony Engine. It is not just a new technology. It is proof that our 2 species can create things together that neither could achieve alone. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's chief liaison to the Catherian Council, leaned forward with interest. Beside her sat Zethai, whose crystalline features had grown brighter over the years of working with humans, as if contact with human creativity had literally brought more light into his life. Show us what it does, Sarah said. Maria placed her hands on the device and closed her eyes. Immediately, the air around it began to shimmer with gentle light, but that was only the beginning. As the device activated, everyone in the room felt something extraordinary. The Catherians, who had spent centuries thinking in pure logic, suddenly found themselves experiencing emotions with a clarity they had forgotten was possible. The humans, who had always struggled to understand complex mathematical relationships, suddenly saw patterns in the universe that they had never noticed before. But more than that, they all felt connected. For a brief moment, every person in the room understood exactly what every other person was thinking and feeling, not through telepathy but through a kind of emotional mathematics that translated experience directly into understanding. Incredible, whispered Thelvas, the eldest of the Catherian counselors. I can feel what it is like to be human. The chaos, the passion, the way you see possibilities in everything. And I can understand Catherian thought, said Director Martinez, tears streaming down his face. The beauty of pure logic, the peace of knowing how everything connects. It is magnificent. Maria deactivated the device and the moment of shared understanding faded, leaving everyone in the room staring at her in amazement. How is this possible? Asked Veltar, one of the young Catherians who had worked closely with human children. No technology should be able to bridge the gap between logic and emotion so completely, Maria smiled. That is exactly the point. We created this using neither pure Catherian logic nor pure human intuition. We used both at the same time, in ways that neither species would have thought to try. She brought up a holographic display showing the development process. It had taken teams of humans and Catherians working together for 3 years, sharing not just knowledge but ways of thinking that had previously been incompatible. Traditional Catherian science says that emotion interferes with logical analysis, Maria explained. Traditional human science says that pure logic misses the most important aspects of reality. But what if both approaches are partially correct and partially wrong? The display showed brain scans of hybrid-educated humans and Catherians, who had learned to think using both approaches simultaneously. We discovered that when humans learn to think with Catherian logic while maintaining human intuition, they do not become less creative. They become more creative, because they can see logical structures that their intuition can build on. And when Catherians learn to feel human emotions while maintaining their logical abilities, they do not become less intelligent. They become more intelligent because emotion provides data that logic alone cannot access. Zethai stood up, his crystalline form almost vibrating with excitement. You are describing a new form of consciousness entirely. Not human, not Catherian, but something that contains the best aspects of both. Exactly, Maria said. And the Harmony Engine is just the beginning. We have teams working on projects that would have been considered impossible just 5 years ago. She changed the display to show other developments happening around the world. In the rebuilt Amazon, human Catherian teams had created forests that grew in patterns that were both mathematically perfect and naturally beautiful. producing more oxygen and supporting more life than any forest in Earth's history. In orbit around the planet, new space stations were being built using architecture that was part grown crystal and part organic engineering, creating living spaces that adapted to their inhabitants' needs. But perhaps most impressive were the cultural developments. The real breakthrough is not technological, Maria continued. It is artistic. Look at this. The display showed a concert being performed in New Geneva, where human and Catherian musicians were playing instruments that responded to both sound and emotion. The music they created was hauntingly beautiful, but more than that, it actually helped plants grow faster and made listeners feel more peaceful and creative. Or this, Maria said, showing images of sculptures that seemed to be made of living light, created by artists who used both Catherian energy manipulation and human aesthetic sense. Or this, she said, displaying footage of children who had been educated using the new hybrid methods. These young people could solve mathematical problems through pure intuition, then explain their solutions using perfect logic. They could feel the emotional content of abstract concepts and create artistic works that followed mathematical principles without sacrificing beauty or meaning. These children are not becoming less human by learning Catherian ways, Maria said. They are becoming more human. They are discovering capabilities that our species always had but never learned to access. Director Martinez raised his hand. But what about the concerns that some groups have raised? There are humans who worry that we are losing our identity, and Catherians who fear that their culture is being diluted. Maria nodded. She had expected this question. Those concerns are based on the assumption that identity is something fixed and unchanging, she said. But both human and Catherian history show us that the most successful societies are the ones that grow and adapt. The question is not whether we are changing. The question is whether we are changing in ways that make us better. She brought up data showing the dramatic improvements in both human and Catherian societies since the alliance began. Human conflict has decreased by 70% as we have learned Catherian methods of resolving disputes through understanding rather than force. Human scientific advancement has accelerated by 300% as we have learned to combine intuition with logic. Human artistic achievement has reached levels that would have been unimaginable before contact. She changed the display to show Catherian data. Meanwhile, Catherian birth rates have increased for the first time in 1,000 years, as your young people rediscover the joy of creating new life. Catherian artistic production has exploded as your people remember how to express emotion through beauty. Most importantly, Catherian exploration and curiosity have returned. Your scientists are asking new questions and making new discoveries for the first time in centuries. Thelva spoke thoughtfully. You are suggesting that by becoming more like each other, we are actually becoming more like ourselves than we have been for a very long time. Yes, Maria said. Humans were always capable of logic and discipline, but we had to learn how to access those abilities without losing our creativity and passion. Catherians were always capable of emotion and wonder, but you had to learn how to experience those feelings without losing your wisdom and clarity, Sethai added. And the children who are growing up now, learning from both traditions from the beginning, are showing us what both species could be if we had always had access to both ways of thinking. Sarah Chen stood up, her face glowing with pride and amazement. Maria, what you and your generation have accomplished is beyond anything we hoped for when the Catherians first arrived. You have not just solved the problems that brought our species together, you have shown us how to become something better than either species could be alone. Maria activated the harmony engine one more time, filling the room with that extraordinary sense of shared understanding. In that moment of connection, every person present could feel the hope and excitement of the young hybrid generation, but also the wisdom and caution of the elders who had lived through the dark times. The harmony engine is not just a device, Maria said as the feeling faded. It is a symbol of what we can achieve when we stop seeing differences as barriers and start seeing them as opportunities to become more complete. As the meeting ended and the counselors filed out, Sarah lingered to speak with Maria privately. There is something else, is there not? Sarah asked. Something you did not want to say in front of the full council. Maria nodded, her expression becoming more serious. The hybrid technologies we are developing are attracting attention from beyond Earth. We have detected signals from other civilizations who are curious about what we are doing here. Some seem friendly, but others... She did not need to finish. Sarah understood. Others might see us as a threat. Or as an opportunity to exploit, Maria said. We are becoming powerful, Dr. Chen. More powerful than either humans or Ket 50 years had passed since Maria Santos first demonstrated the Harmony engine, and the galaxy would never be the same. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the starship New Horizon, her great-granddaughter beside her, watching as their fleet approached a solar system that had never seen visitors from beyond its own worlds. At 120 years old, Sarah was still strong and healthy thanks to Catherian medical advances. But more importantly, she was still learning. The fleet that surrounded them was a marvel that represented the best of what two species could achieve together. The ships were grown rather than built, using living crystal technology that could repair itself and adapt to new situations. They were crewed by humans and Catherians working as one people, but also by beings from 17 other species that had joined their alliance over the past decades. Tell me again about the Vorthak, said Elena Chen Vex, Sarah's great-granddaughter, whose name reflected the new naming traditions that honored both human and Catherian heritage. Elena was one of the third generation of hybrid-educated beings, equally comfortable with human emotion and Catherian logic, but also trained in the philosophical traditions of the Zelani energy dancers and the mathematical poetry of the Christek hive minds. The Vorthak are ancient, Sarah explained, looking at the data flowing across the ship's living displays. Much older than either humans or Catherians. They have built an empire that spans thousands of worlds, but it is an empire built on conquest and exploitation. They take promising species and either enslaves them or destroys them. Sarah touched the control interface, and the display showed images captured by long-range scouts. The Vorthak were massive beings, each one the size of a small building with thick armor plating and weapons that could level cities. Their ships were dark and angular, built for intimidation and destruction rather than beauty or efficiency. They have been expanding toward this region of the galaxy for centuries, Sarah continued. According to our information, they consider any species that cannot defend itself to be automatically inferior and suitable for conquest. Any species that can defend itself is considered a threat to be eliminated. Elena frowned. So they are coming here to conquer us or destroy us. That was their plan, said Zethai, appearing beside them with the quiet grace that Catherians had never lost, even as they learned human spontaneity. At over 1,000 years old, he was considered elderly even by Catherian standards, but his crystal skin still held flecks of the bright blue that indicated active curiosity and engagement with life. Was their plan? Elena asked. Zethai's expression showed what Sarah had learned to recognize as Catherian amusement mixed with human anticipation. They did not expect to encounter what we have become. The main display shifted to show the approaching Vorthak fleet. There were hundreds of ships, each one bristling with weapons designed to shatter planets and enslave populations. It was a force that would have terrified any single species. But Sarah felt no fear as she watched them approach. The human-Catherian alliance had grown far beyond what anyone had imagined possible in those early days of first contact. They had become the gardeners of the galaxy, traveling from world to world not to conquer but to nurture. Wherever they went, they helped struggling species learn to heal their worlds and expand their capabilities. They taught the balance between logic and emotion, order and creativity, individual achievement and collective wisdom, but they had also learned to defend themselves and their allies. Captain, came the voice of Veltar from the bridge. The young Catherian was now a ship commander, equally skilled in human tactical thinking and Catherian strategic analysis. The Vorthak fleet is hailing us. They are demanding our immediate surrender, Sarah smiled. Put them through. The display filled with the image of a Vorthak war leader, a massive creature whose scarred armor showed the results of countless battles. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone. Unknown vessels, the Vorthak growled. You are trespassing in territory claimed by the Vorthak Empire. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. We are prepared to show mercy to species that submit completely to our authority. Elena stepped forward, representing the new generation that had never known fear of external threats. Honored Vorthak Commander, she said politely. We are explorers and gardeners, not conquerors. We have come to this region to offer assistance to species that might need help healing their worlds or expanding their knowledge. We have no interest in your empire and pose no threat to your people. The Vorthak war leader's expression showed what might have been confusion. Assistance? You offer assistance without demanding payment or submission? Yes, Elena said simply. It is what we do. The war leader was silent for a moment, then his expression hardened. Lies, no species offers help without seeking advantage. You are either fools or you are more dangerous than you appear. Either way, you will be destroyed. The communication ended, and immediately the Vorthak fleet began moving into attack formation. All ships. Veltar's voice came over the fleet communication system. Prepare for defensive action. Remember, our goal is protection, not conquest. We want to disable their ability to attack, not destroy their people. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy learned what the human-Cytherian alliance had truly become. The Vorthak opened fire with weapons that could crack moons, expecting to face either terrified flight or desperate last-ditch resistance. Instead, they encountered something they had never seen before. The Alliance ships did not return fire in any conventional sense. Instead, they activated harmony fields that turned the Vorthak weapons against themselves. The massive energy blasts that should have destroyed the Alliance fleet were absorbed, transformed, and redirected back at the attackers with surgical precision that disabled weapon systems without killing crews. But that was only the beginning. As the Vorthak fleet found itself suddenly disarmed, the Alliance ships began broadcasting something that no conqueror in galactic history had ever encountered. Pure, concentrated hope. The transmission was carried by technology based on Maria Santos's original Harmony engine, but refined and amplified over 50 years of development. It did not attack Vorthak minds or force them to think differently. Instead, it simply showed them what life could be like without conquest, without fear, without the constant need to dominate others. For the first time in their species' history, the Vorthak experienced peace. The effect was immediate and profound. On ship after ship, Vorthak warriors stopped fighting and began asking questions they had never thought to ask. What would it feel like to create instead of destroy? What would it be like to help instead of hurt? What could they accomplish if they used their strength to build instead of tear down? Some of the Vorthak ships tried to retreat, but they were gently surrounded by Alliance vessels that continued broadcasting the harmony fields, not as weapons but as gifts. This is impossible, came a new voice over the communication system. It was a different Vorthak, one whose voice carried confusion instead of rage. We are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. How are you defeating us without fighting? Elena responded with the patience that her generation had learned from both human compassion and Cytherian wisdom. We are not defeating you. We are showing you another way to be strong. The conversation that followed lasted for days. The Vorthak, immobilized but unharmed, found themselves in dialogue with beings who refused to treat them as enemies despite their obvious hostile intent. Humans shared stories of how they had learned to overcome their own violent impulses. Cytherians explained how logic and emotion could work together to create better solutions than either could achieve alone. Other Alliance species contributed their own perspectives on how to transform conflict into cooperation. Slowly, incredibly, the Vorthak began to change. It started with the younger members of their crews, who had not yet become completely set in the old ways of thinking. They began asking to visit Alliance ships to see how beings could live without constant conflict. They learned about art and music and philosophy. They discovered that strength could be used to protect instead of to conquer. The older Vorthak were more resistant, but even they could not ignore the evidence before their eyes. The Alliance species were clearly powerful enough to destroy the Vorthak fleet easily, but instead they had chosen to offer friendship and assistance. They had shown strength through restraint rather than aggression. By the end of the month, the first Vorthak colonies were asking to join the Alliance. Sarah stood again on the observation deck, watching as Vorthak engineers worked alongside human and Cytherian scientists to transform one of their old warships into an exploration vessel. The massive guns that had once terrorized planets were being converted into tools for healing damaged ecosystems and building new habitats for struggling species. Grandmother, Elena said, using the human term of affection, even though their relationship was both more complex and more simple than pure human genetics would suggest. Do you think this is what you and Zethai imagined when the Cytherians first came to Earth? Sarah laughed, a sound that held both Humaharian